On January 3, 2026, in the dead of night, the U.S. military pulled off an operation that seemed straight out of a movie. They went into the capital of Venezuela with a single target, its sitting president. So let's break down exactly how Nicolás Maduro was captured and brought to the United States to face justice.
And just 2 days later, those were the words of that same man, Nicolás Maduro, standing in a federal courtroom in Manhattan. I mean, it's a wild scene to even imagine. So you have to ask, how on earth does a head of state end up in a U.S. courtroom claiming he's been kidnapped?
Well, this definitely didn't happen out of the blue. This whole event was really the breaking point after decades of relations between the U.S. and Venezuela just completely falling apart. It was a slow burn that suddenly turned into an explosion.
So let's trace the timeline here. You can really see it start back in 1998 with Hugo Chavez, who began steering Venezuela onto an anti-U.S. path. But a huge turning point came in 2020 when the U.S. Department of Justice actually indicted Maduro, officially labeling him a narco-terrorist. Then, things really escalated after the disputed 2024 election. Maduro gets inaugurated anyway, and diplomatic ties just shatter. By late 2025, the U.S. was already launching direct military strikes on ships at sea, which really set the stage for a brand new, much more aggressive foreign policy.
And that new policy was called the Trump Corollary. You can think of it as the old Monroe Doctrine on steroids. At its core, it was all about reasserting American dominance in the Western Hemisphere. The main goal? To block rivals, specifically China and Russia, from getting any kind of strategic foothold in America's backyard. And of course, Venezuela, with its close ties to both countries, was basically the first big test of this idea.
All right, so the political stage is set. The justifications are in place. Now let's get into the operation itself. The mission to grab Maduro, which was codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve.
To kick things off, the U.S. threw a massive force of over 150 aircraft at Caracas, and their job wasn't just to provide air cover, it was to create something the military calls environmental dominance. They essentially made the city go dark and silent, jamming radar, taking out the power grid, and just completely overwhelming Venezuela's air defenses.
Without electronic chaos sown, the team on the ground moved incredibly fast. From the moment they got the green light, it took U.S. Army Delta Force and the CIA just 2 hours and 15 minutes to find Maduro, secure him and his wife Celia Flores, and get them out. Just think about that, a little over 2 hours.
Now, if you look at the human cost, the numbers tell a really interesting story. Sure, 24 Venezuelan security forces were killed. But look at this, 32 Cuban military and intelligence officers. That sent a huge message about how deeply Cuba was involved in keeping Maduro in power. And on the flip side, the U.S. pulled this off with 0 fatalities. So, to quickly recap the key details of this whole snatch and grab, the targets, obviously, Maduro and his wife. They were located at Fort Tuna, a big military base in Caracas. The raid was led by America's most elite special forces, and they were whisked away by helicopter to the USS Iwo Jima, which was waiting for them out in the Caribbean. Okay, so the military part is over, but that's when a totally unprecedented legal drama begins. A former head of state, now a defendant in an American courtroom.
Picture this, it's January 5th and Maduro and Flores are standing before a U.S. judge. Through an interpreter, they both plead not guilty to all charges. In the judge's decision, Maduro is to be held without any possibility of bail, kicking off what's sure to be a historic legal fight. And let's be clear about the charges themselves, because this is the crucial part. These aren't just political complaints. We're talking about serious federal crimes. The list includes narco-terrorism conspiracy, conspiracy to import cocaine into the U.S., and 2 different counts related to machine guns. If he's convicted, Maduro could be looking at life in prison.
You know, an operation this bold was guaranteed to send shockwaves around the world. And the international reaction was instant, and it was completely divided. The world basically split right down the middle. In one corner, you had praise from U.S. allies in the region like Argentina and Ecuador, not to mention Venezuelan expats who were thrilled. But in the other corner, you had a loud chorus of condemnation. And not just from the usual rivals like Russia and China. Even neighbors like Chile, Mexico, and Brazil were raising serious alarms about violating another country's sovereignty.
Russia's official statement pretty much sums up that side of the argument. They didn't see this as a law enforcement action. To them, it was a straight-up illegal attack on an independent nation, and one that sets a really dangerous precedent for the rest of the world.
With Maduro gone, the fallout was immediate and chaotic. It created a massive power vacuum in Venezuela and sparked a fierce political debate right here in the United States. Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. What happens now? Because capturing Maduro was one thing, but figuring out what to do next, well, that's a whole different ballgame.
A bunch of huge questions popped up right away. For starters, who is actually running Venezuela? The vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, seems to have stepped in, but it's shaky. Then there's the American plan, or lack of one. President Trump saying the U.S. would be running the country just created more confusion. And what about the Venezuelan opposition? Their leader was pretty much publicly dismissed by the White House. And all of this is swirling around the giant prize, Venezuela's massive oil reserves.
Back home in the U.S., the reaction was just as split as it was internationally, breaking down right along party lines. Republicans were calling it bold and flawless, even promising it would lead to cheaper gas prices. But Democrats were calling it clearly illegal and warning that without a clear plan, it could drag the U.S. into some kind of endless war.
So in the end, it really all boils down to one fundamental question. Was the capture of Nicolás Maduro a bold new way to hold a corrupt narco-state accountable? Or was it a reckless act that just tore up the rulebook of international law? Whether this is a new form of justice or just a dangerous new precedent, well, that's the debate this whole incredible event leaves us with.